Would you ever buy a brand of mower that you've never heard of before? I'm still on the fence about the topic, but I might have to reconsider my answer after having picked up this lawnmower someone was giving away. I don't typically pass on deals like this, but this one had me hesitating for just a bit. I mean, it's just a lawnmower. It's got an engine, blade, 4 wheels, and a handlebar. What could possibly be the difference? In today's video, we're going to be looking at this garden line lawnmower, and the problem is that I just picked it up and I'm not sure if it even runs. Now, I found this mower by using an app on my phone where people like you and me can post stuff to be given away. But when I arrived at the house to pick it up and realized that I've never heard of the brand before, I really had to think if I was ready to deal with the problems it might have, especially with parts. Now, I'm going to try and repair this lawnmower, but yours might be different, so this might not work on yours. So if things are not working out for you, like in the video, please ask about it, and I'll be glad to answer your questions. So as you can see, the mower is branded as a garden line, and the model number is shown as well, but there's a massive problem. If you do a search for that model number, you're not going to find very much information about it, and that also includes the much needed owner's manual. But right now, we're not going to worry about it, and instead focus on getting it running again, and then we'll worry about getting parts we need. So it turns out that the oil level is a bit on the low side, and to keep from hurting the engine before we try and start it, I'll add a couple of ounces to it. Next, I want to check and see just how much gasoline is in the fuel tank, and surprisingly, there is some in there. Now, I don't know if it's any good or not, but I do want to test it as is and get an idea of what the previous owner was experiencing with it. I'm also not sure why the spark plug wire was disconnected from the plug, so I'll just replace it and then we'll try and start it. Oh, and just to get an idea about how old this mower is, the label for the engine says it was made in 2017, so it's about 7 years old. So of course it's not going to start, which is pretty much what I expected. Next, I'll spray some gasoline into the carb and try that again. So this time it started and ran for about a whole second, but it didn't sound all that confident about doing it. Either way, this test confirms that this engine has a working ignition system and enough compression to at least run. So after looking at the blade, I can see a pretty serious gouge on the edge, which might explain the poor test start. The reason why is because hitting something hard with the blade could cause the flywheel key to shear and make it difficult to start and run. That means we'll have to inspect the flywheel key and see if it's damaged, and if it is, we'll have to replace it, and hopefully that'll allow the engine to start and run a whole lot easier. Now before we get too far into this project, I'm going to do some house cleaning. And before you tell me I'm getting a bit OCD, I will let you know that cleaning is part of the maintenance mentioned in the owner's manual. And the only reason it looks like I might be going a bit overboard on the cleaning is because the cleaning I'm giving it might be the first one this mower has ever had. That means there's going to be a lot to clean, and it's going to take quite a bit of time. However, I am going to speed up the process so we can get back to fixing this mower. So to inspect the flywheel key, we'll have to get down to the top of the engine where the crankshaft connects to the flywheel. So after taking off the starter cup, we should be able to see the key sitting in the keyway on the crankshaft. Now the key from the top should look like a square piece of metal, which ours does. But if yours doesn't look like this, but instead looks like the Z piece from Tetris, it means the key is damaged and affecting the ignition timing. You'll then need to use a puller to remove the flywheel from the crankshaft and then replace the key. Fortunately for this engine, the key is in perfect shape, which means there could be something else causing the engine to start the way that it does. I also noticed that the emissions hose was not connected to the port on the backside of the filter base. Now this is not what you want to see, because it means the engine was able to pull in unfiltered air through this opening. And if left this way long enough, will wear out this engine a lot faster than it should. Now this mistake happens a lot when you take off the base, and upon reinstallation, most never see that it was connected in the first place. However, it is a lot easier to spot this hose with the cover off the engine. Now you don't need to take it off, but it makes it a lot easier to install the hose. What this means is that more than likely someone's taken off the carb to service or replace it at some point. Now this could be a good thing or a bad thing depending upon the situation, and in our case it means we'll have to check the carb for a possible issue. Now I was beginning to question the quality of this machine only because I really didn't see any real pros for picking this off-brand mower. That was until this point, and that's because this is when I noticed that the wheels were so easy to spin. After spraying off the front wheel, which was hanging off the table, I noticed that it was taking a long time to slow down. Now at first I thought the water was acting like a lubricant to help reduce the friction at the axle, however that was not the case. And after taking a closer look at the back side of the wheel, this is when I noticed that these wheels had ball bearings in them just like a lot of high-end machines. So why put them on a cheap off-brand mower then? Now to be honest, I don't have a good answer for you, but I will tell you that this mower went from a snowball's chance someplace hot to a decent possibility that I would buy it. Part of the reason why is because of the engine that's on it. It is, in my mind, a fairly decent one with plenty of parts on hand. And the second reason being the ball bearings in the wheels. It makes it seem like they wanted this mower to last longer than a handful of years. Now a minor issue why I wouldn't buy this mower is because it's not self-propel, which is something I really prefer. But there is a huge problem with this mower that's keeping me from buying it, and I'll let you know more about it here in a bit. So after the washing, it turns out that dull green paint looks a whole lot better than I was expecting. I do have to remind you that depending upon how you dilute your degreaser, you have to be very careful to not leave it on there for too long. Otherwise the degreaser could strip the finish right off the paint, leaving you with a very flat looking paint with no shine. But if that does happen to you, you can always use car care products to bring that shine right back. Now, I'm going to drain the gasoline that was in the tank and see if there might be something wrong with it. We're looking to see if there is any water in the gasoline or if the gasoline is very old and unusable in a small engine. So first off, the gasoline is very dark in color, meaning this gasoline is old, and the other issue is that there's water at the bottom of the jar. Now believe it or not, the gasoline might still be usable and it's just the water that's keeping the engine from starting. So I'm just going to pour the gasoline portion back into my bottle and leave the rest with the water in the jar. Now the problem is the water is most likely already in the carb, so we'll have to take the carb off and drain the water out and also inspect it for any other issues. So once again, taking off the top cover will make taking off the carb a lot easier because we'll be able to take the fuel tank off as well. Now the main reason why taking the carb off without the tank is difficult is because the fuel line is extremely short, making it tough to remove. But with the cover gone, all we have to do is pull up on the fuel tank to release it and then pull the carb off the intake and disconnect the linkage to it. After that, we'll then need to remove 2 screws holding on the bowl and then carefully pry the bowl loose. Now I was trying to be extra careful because I was trying to capture the contents of the bowl. That way we can examine it and confirm that there was water in the bowl as well, which there was. Next, I'm going to make sure that the opening in the brass main jet is clear, otherwise fuel won't be able to pass through the carb. Now this one was clear, however if yours was clogged, then use a bit of small wire to open it back up. And it wouldn't hurt to follow that up with some carb cleaner as well. Then we're going to very carefully take out the white plastic cartridge from the carb to make sure all the openings in it are also clear. It's also best if you take it apart, that way you can see all the smaller openings in the emulsion tube as well. Just be very careful when you take it apart. Now to be honest, it appears that this carb was in working condition, which is really strange considering how old the gasoline looked. So why didn't all the openings in the carb get clogged up then? Well, the answer might surprise you. It was the water that was contaminating the fuel. So these engines with the plastic carbs are known for one thing, and that is the main jet will clog up if you leave gasoline in the system for more than a couple of months. But with the water surrounding the main jet, it basically protected the jet from the gasoline, which sounds kind of strange. Now that's the best I could figure out, but if you have a better idea on how this jet was able to not get clogged in all that time being unused, I'd certainly like to hear about it. Now there is one more thing I need to do, and that is to take off the O-ring and the plastic retainer from the intake pipe. The reason why is because the O-ring is the only thing sealing the backside of the carb to the engine, and without it in place, it'll make the engine run poorly. Once they've been put back on the carb, then we can reconnect the linkage and then carefully install the carb back onto the intake pipe. So this is when things can go wrong rather quickly. After that, we can then replace the fuel tank back on its tabs. The reason why this part is so dangerous is because it puts the most stress on the plastic pieces on both the carb and the fuel tank, and plastics have a tendency to break over time. Also, don't forget to install the emissions hose back on its port on the filter base, otherwise this engine won't last more than a couple of years. Now to prove whether or not the gasoline that was in the tank when we got this mower is any good, I'm going to pour it back into the fuel tank. Now the next part is very important, which is to wait and see if the carb is going to leak any gasoline. So it's best to do this test with the air filter and cover off, that way you can see if the gasoline might be leaking back into the carb and into the engine as well. And if you do see any gasoline in the inlet of the carb, then you'll need to either take the carb apart again and clean it, or you may want to replace the carb completely. And if you do see any gasoline in the inlet of the carb, then you'll need to either take the carb apart again and clean it, or you may want to consider just replacing it. Now, I was able to clean and reuse the air filter, and that's because it was in great shape, but if yours is breaking apart, I would definitely consider replacing it. Now, even though these wheels do have ball bearings in them, I'm still going to put some lube on them, and you might find this a little unneeded, and I understand. However, these ball bearings are not the sealed, high-quality ones you might be thinking of, so a little bit of lube won't hurt them. I also want to show you just how easy it is to move this mower around by using my pull meter. Now, I would expect a reading of about 1 to 1.5 kilograms to be typical for something like this, but as you can see, it's even less than that, which means this mower is very easy to use. So it's been running for about 3 minutes, which means the engine should be close to normal temperature. Next, we'll see if it'll start back up without any issues. So this time it started back up without all that pulling that it needed when it was cold, which is great news. However, the cold start needs a bit of work. So to deal with the cold starting issue, we'll need to inspect the valve lash and see if it's out of tolerance, and if it is, we'll need to readjust it. So what is the biggest problem with this mower that's keeping me from buying it that I mentioned earlier? Simply put, it's finding the parts for it. Now do me a favor and do a search online for this mower and tell me what you find. After that, I think you'll understand why I wouldn't want an off-brand mower. Now, if you do need a good working lawnmower, this one will do nicely. However, if you need parts, you're going to need to be a bit creative and start looking for other parts that might work for this mower. So my question is, would you buy an off-brand mower that had very little customer support and almost zero support when it comes to parts, or does it even matter to you? Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions about this project or about your own projects, and I hope to see you in the next video.